What's up, everybody? Welcome to Self-Helpless Snacks, where we give you a little taste of the Self-Helpless podcast with some quick tips and inspo via a mini episode. I'm Delanie Fischer, and today I'm chatting with Brock Gill, who is a magician, host of the show Moto Mission, nonprofit founder, and someone who just really personifies adventure. And I actually met Brock and his wife Ani when Cam and I were on our honeymoon in Ireland. We were at this really awesome castle called Kilkee Castle, about an hour outside of Dublin, and we were in their bar area, and us four just got to chatting, and they are such lovely people doing really amazing and unique things together. And so Brock is sharing how he followed a calling that he had, and for him this calling really came out of nowhere. It was not something that was even remotely on his radar. And he also shares some of the obstacles that him and Ani have faced while following this thing through, basically, and how this one thing that he decided to pursue resulted in a career that has taken them all over the world, which led to them helping the people that they would meet on their travels, which transformed into a nonprofit and then led to a TV show, book, all these amazing things. So Brock mentions some examples that really remind me of two pretty popular quotes. Number one, that quote, when you want something, the universe conspires to help you. And number two, that Christine Kane quote that says something like, sometimes when you're in a dark place, you think you've been buried, but actually you've been planted. You'll understand why those two quotes really resonate with me when I think about what Brock shared today. And I just love this snippet because it's just a reminder that you don't have to know the next 50 steps in your life or career or overthink where something is going to take you. You can just follow that little voice or whisper or inkling that you have. And just a heads up, most of the mini episodes I've been sharing are snippets of full episodes with my lovely guests that are currently available for free on my email list, the D list. So if you want to tune into the full conversation, you can do so at delaniefischer.com. Again, everything is free to tune into. All right, here's Brock. You do all these incredible things. I could not have even made this up. Like the how unique your streams of revenue and your lifestyle is. So can you just give people a snapshot of what you do, who you help, all that good stuff?
Oh my gosh. You know what? I'll be honest, I'm still trying to put it into words also because I'm kind of mind blown like regularly. It's like what is happening right now with my life. So I part of my year I'm doing stage shows, magic shows in different parts of the world, and I've done shows on big stages all over the place, and also in some random small places like Central American prisons, for example, or in the Arctic Circle in villages, or in refugee communities. I mean, I do shows in all these different random places. So that is part of what I do. But it was the only thing I did for 25 years. That was like the gig. But in the last few years, it's kind of changing to the refugee crisis in places like Ukraine and also in Greece. We started a nonprofit to try to help people in some of those areas. So we have an office in Greece where we do a lot of our work, but we're also in some other areas. And then I'm riding adventure motorcycles in different places around the world. And so yeah, that's the three big ones that I have going. That's a lot of plates to spin.
Oh my gosh, it's so cool. And I know not all of this happened at once. And so I'm so curious. You mentioned that magic is how you started and then things kind of unfolded from there. What's your origin story behind how this began? What was the very first thing?
Oh, put your seatbelt on. This is a crazy one. And I still don't believe it myself, but after high school, I spent a little bit of time, dipping my toes in and out of college and trying to figure out what to do with my life. And I really had no answer. I ended up working. I was just kind of broke and was working at a like a sawmill. I was living in Texas, but I was working in Arkansas. It was about an hour drive, and I would have to work all night in the graveyard shift making lumber. Really hard blue collar
Wow.
job, like very difficult. But I had earplugs in about 60 hours a week, so I couldn't talk to anyone. And I'm sweating and working as hard as I could and trying to figure out what am I going to do? I'm 22 years old. What am I going to do with my life? This is clearly not my career path here. And so honestly, I just started praying like, okay, God, what am I going to do? What do I do with my life? And this is the most random thing, but I begin to hear like like a whisper, not in my ears, but like in my heart. How about magic shows? And I was like, what? Because I don't even know a magic trick. Like I've
Wow.
never even been to a magic show, but it was just this random idea that I started to kind of wrestle with. And I was like, where are these ideas coming from? And
Yeah.
so it kept me up at night. Like it was just something I struggled with. I wrestled with it honestly for about 6 or 8 months, and finally was like, I think this is what I'm supposed to pursue. And at that point, I started reading some books and trying to practice and learn how to do some things. And I didn't really know anything, but I was like, I'm done with sawmill life. I'm going to quit my job, and I did. And immediately, I started getting booking requests to go do shows. Now, that was scary because I didn't have a show together. But what had happened was I started telling a few of my friends, like, hey, I think I'm going to do this. And, a few weeks later, they told their friends, like, hey, I've got a friend who's a magician. They were, oh, cool, let's book him for our event, not
Oh
knowing I
my
don't actually do it yet.
God, that's incredible.
So, yeah.
Wow.
So I'm not going to say no to the gig, So I go. Let me tell you the first show. Okay, my roommate, his name is Brian. He and I got in my little pickup truck. It was a two-seater pickup truck, and we're going to the first show down in. We were headed to South Louisiana, and on the way there, we're on the interstate I-49, and we see a juggler hitchhiking, and we were like, "What? That's so random. He's a juggler hitchhiking on the side of the interstate. Let's pick him up." So we picked him up. He hopped in the back cargo area of the pickup truck. We said we're going to a magic show. He said, great. He became my opener. So we go to the first
Oh
show.
my
I know,
gosh.
right? So
That's
I'm
unreal.
I'm already in a panic. I don't know how to do a magic show, and I just booked a
You
show.
booked an opener. You have a
Yeah,
feature.
I have an opener my very first day. Yeah. So his name was Andrew. He comes out. He starts juggling and doing. He's a professional. He's really great, and
Wow.
so he's doing his thing, and then he introduces me. And at this point, the audience just believes we're a troupe. Like they think we're pros, right? So I get out there and I kind of struggle through my first few routines, and I was a little bit dense in the fact that I didn't realize as I was practicing that at some point there were going to be real people in the audience. Okay, that sounds kind of dumb. But all my practice was in front of a mirror, and I just made sure it looked good. But the presentation side of it was like so far, I didn't even think about that. So here I am
Yeah.
on stage in front of real people going, oh my gosh, I have to actually present this, I have to talk, communicate through this. And so
Yeah.
I had to write my scripts in the moment. So I had this really like laid back kind of approach from day one. I mean, that's me anyway, that's my personality. So that was
Yeah.
an easy default, but that's where it all started.
Oh my gosh, I have so many questions. That is so incredible. Okay, so when you booked your first gig and you hadn't really done magic yet, what what did you do? How did you put a show together in your head? Did you Google stuff? What was that like leading up to your first gig?
This was in 1997. I don't know if Google was a
Right?
thing
Does
yet. At
Google
least I
exist?
hadn't
Yeah,
heard of it.
right.
Right. So it wasn't as simple as like, let's go to the internet and try to figure it out. I had to buy
Right.
books and work through books. The first book I had, I mean, it was, I don't know, 2 inches thick. And I'm just like plowing through, like, what in the world is like relevant here? What can I use? And honestly, it was just trial and error and just like teaching
Yeah.
myself like a rope trick or a card trick or just basic things. And then from there, obviously, it started to develop, and the art side of me, like the artist side started to develop, and it became more of like a unique show.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did that first gig go?
I did about total of about 45 minutes
Oh
with a
my
yeah,
gosh.
yeah. And I had a little break in the middle. I didn't even have like like a set list. I didn't even know what I would do. I knew what I was going to do first and probably second, but I was so dumb. I didn't know. I'm just like I'm just going to do some things. Let's see how it goes. And I guess that's how life is for me anyway. I don't plan a whole lot. I'm more just like risk it for the biscuit kind of guy.
Yeah.
And I guess in front of a bunch of people, that's probably not the best idea, but that it it worked. And honestly, I
Sure.
got through the show without me falling on my face, so to speak. Like
Yeah.
it worked. And people were like, yeah, cool, it was a great show. And I was like, oh my gosh, they had no idea. It was the first show and I didn't know what I was doing. And then I quickly went to
Wow.
my second show and it was just a little bit better. And I kind of remembered script and routine from the previous, and it was like it started to kind of find its footing a little bit. And Yeah, and then honestly, that's the only thing I did. I didn't go back to work. That's all I did was show. So I had to hustle. I was shaking the trees. Like I was hustle to try to get shows booked. And for 25 years, that's all I did. I hustled and did shows all over the world. And yeah.
Wow. And so when you did that first show, did you get that feeling of I really love this? Or were you just like, I'm just gonna keep doing this because I like it better than making lumber at 2 in the morning?
There's some truth to that. Anything's better than making lumber at 2 in the morning. There was that, but
Yeah.
that was probably more of my thought. If you put it on a scale, that would outweigh the passion of what I was doing because I didn't love it yet because
Yeah.
it was too stressful and too much work and too much uncertainty. And I didn't, it took a while before I found like the joy of performing. It was mechanical and it was like my thoughts were trying to get it right. So it was more that than me performing in the beginning. So that wasn't very fun in my mind. But
Yeah.
after a few shows and after a few months, it started being like, well, this is fun. And then I kind of found my groove. And then that's when my heart, my personality, and everything started to kind of grow. It evolved into this thing on stage. And then it was like, okay, this is it.
Thank you so much for being honest about that. Of like, yeah, it didn't spark
Yeah.
a ton of passion, overwhelming amount of passion in the beginning, because sometimes that passion grows and develops. And you just kind of had this thing like, this is better than what I was doing. Let's try it. So many people tuning in right now are probably wondering like the logistics of how you left that lumber job right into magic full time. What was your day to day like? How were you living? How were you making rent? How did you do that so quickly?
Well, okay, so it started with I actually saved money. So I knew that I was
Okay.
going to quit in a few months. Like I had a few months to prepare and I started to kind of put away money. The main thing was
Okay.
I had to get out of debt. I got out of debt and I put some cash away. So I knew I had a little bit
Okay.
of money to live on for, and it wasn't much, but a couple of months I could probably get by. Now, at 22, your expenses aren't necessarily the same. So I got three other roommates to get a house and bought a bicycle. Like I was really shaved every expense down. So I'm like, look, I'm spending no money for the next few months because I have to make this work. The first, year was very difficult and equipment and all of those expenses was just difficult. And I just had to find ways to do it. You just hustle and figure it out. I met some guys riding bicycles across the country 2 years ago, and I was asking them about it. They left from Philadelphia and rode to San Francisco on bicycles. And I was like, dude, how in the world do you do that? How do you plan? And the guy looked at me and he says, most people plan it and then do it. I say do it, then plan it.
Oh, I love that. What a great quote.
Yeah, I couldn't plan in advance
Yeah.
for what I was going to experience. But I did it, and then in the moment was having to plan. There was things there's not a book on the how to of what I was doing. There was no playbook.
Right.
About 2 years into it, I decide to marry my best friend. Her name is Ani, who you met.
Yes.
Yeah, she's awesome, and so she kind of knew what she was getting into. But I had quite a few shows booked. We were extremely busy. Like at that point, like it's happening, and so I purchased a lot of equipment and lots of stuff, stuff for stage, like sound and lighting and curtains and like everything you need to make a big stage show. And we had it in a trailer, and that trailer was parked at our house. And we came out to the driveway and noticed that trailer wasn't there one day. And that's a problem because I had enough money to purchase some things, but not enough money to insure it, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
So I had about $25,000 worth of gear and equipment that was lost like in an instant.
Oh
And
my God.
so, yeah. And so then I had a real problem. I'm like, I just got
Mhm.
married 3 months ago. We are barely making it as it is. And I just lost everything. And that's when the heat turned up. That was when the rubber hit the road. Like, hey, are we doing this or not? Because it was really fun and it was hard work and it was really fun, up until that point. But at that point, when you lose everything, dude,
Yeah.
it gets real. And so at first I was too like, it was like a depression, I just kind of
Yeah.
couldn't get out of bed. I was just so lost. It was just like, I don't know what to do. But my wife,
Yeah.
who's, her faith is extremely real, and she started praying and she started asking other people to kind of get involved. Like, hey, can you just kind of like stand here with us and like pray with us? We need help. Like, we don't know what to say or what to do, but like we have no answers. And here's what happened. And again, this is before we had like social media and all of those kinds of things that we know of today. But we had a few people just start sending us checks like, hey, here's $50. You might need this. And here's $75. And here's $20. You might need this. And we started to kind of put down on a piece of paper the equipment that we needed to kind of rebuild. I wasn't the hero here. Ani, my wife, she started kind of doing this, took the initiative. She had a little bit more emotional kind of equity to draw from at that point. Yeah. And we noticed in just a few months' time that as we would write something down, like we need a sound system that would cost, $2,000, whatever. We would look up and go, oh my gosh, we just got enough money to pay like exactly to the dollar for that. Oh. And we have 4 legal pad pages of these things. And within a few months, all of our equipment had been rebuilt, repurchased, new stuff, bigger, better. We experienced a lot in those. There was about 18 months of a lot of hard things that we had to deal with. Theft with the trailer. Right after that was our house got flooded. Long story. Right after that, we were like, we get all of our new stuff. We got a box truck, like a moving truck that we were traveling in, and we had it for a little while, and then it caught on fire and it burned up like completely.
Oh my gosh!
I know, and it just continues. And then I get literally the next day I get a rental truck. And then it gets broken into at the hotel. And it was just like one thing after another. And I'll save you, but I mean, I have tons of those stories that was like out of the blue, like out of nowhere. And so all of this is on the baseline. The foundation was faith, but we moved forward. In some ways, it felt like anytime something bad would happen, the end result of that, like as we repaired or rebuilt, it almost seemed like it benefited us. So it made us tough. It built our character, of course, but also put us in positions to make us better in the next season of life. Here's an example. We lose all of our stuff to theft. We rebuild. We lose it to fire. We rebuild. As we get everything kind of put back together, we get a call from someone that says, we're doing a national tour and we need you for this. And that's about the time I was about to buy a whole new travel rig. Like it was like a semi truck and trailer that we could live in. It was a big, like a tour bus kind of situation. That wouldn't have even been on the radar. We wouldn't have been able to do that big tour outside of all of these things kind of led to that. And so, wow. Yeah. And that kind of put us on the map, so to speak. So at that point, we're coast to coast traveling and doing shows. And so what we thought was like really bad stuff, it actually turned out to be really good. So
I had chills the entire time you were talking. You kept going, and obviously Ani was a huge driving force going through that. You can see that they were maybe stepping stones or kind of blessings in disguise, a lot of disguise, because it's hard to go through. What would you say to somebody right now who might be kind of in the thick of that right now? They're going after this dream, but they're coming up against all these events or resistance. What kind of got you through those times before you knew it was going to work out and you were going to come back even bigger and better?
For me, it felt like a calling. I mean, it literally felt like I had heard God's voice on like, hey, here's a direction for you. You asked, I'm giving it to you. Yeah. And once I understood that there was a calling and there was affirmation of that calling, obviously there was tons of that affirmation. Then all of those stumbling kind of blocks, those walls, those, whatever metaphor you want to use, like all of those problems along the way, it was like, okay, we don't have a plan B and we don't take no for an answer. Like we're going to go for this. And there was a lot of grit. Passion and grit would be like the thing that we could define those times. Knowing, and knowing is the key word here, but knowing the right direction, then I'll go that way come hell or high water.
Thank you for tuning in to the Self-Helpless podcast. You can find our Patreon community, merch, and other goodies at selfhelplesspodcast.com. We'd be thrilled if you left an iTunes review, shared this episode with a friend, or post about it on Instagram and tag at Self-Helpless Podcast so we can repost you and say hi. Thanks, everyone.